What's up, Guava Bees? Welcome to a very special episode of the Dear Guava Bean podcast. Today, I'm speaking with a guest named Josh Glover. Josh is a brand and visual identity designer. He is the very talented freelancer behind the Guava Bean logo and our visual identity. I worked with him in the very early days of Guava Bean to help design our brand. And he was one of the very first freelancer stories that we ever published. Naturally, when I wanted to record these podcast episodes, I reached out to him because he is, like I said, an extremely talented freelancer. But one of the reasons he's so talented is because he loves this work so much. He's very passionate about design. He takes it much further than just the design, and for him, it's all about telling the story, telling the message, helping brands and business owners communicate their message effectively. And I'm extremely thankful for what he's helped us do with Guava Bean. So I hope you really enjoy this episode. Josh talks a lot about how he got started, where he finds clients, how he prices his services, who he looks up to, and we cover a lot of ground in this episode. This one is for all the creative unicorns out there. I think everyone will benefit from it, but Josh is a creative unicorn. We talk a lot about design and about art and about the kind of like the subtle stuff that goes into creating a business and a presence as a freelancer. I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you love it, please share it with your friends, subscribe to the podcast. You can find us on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, on our website, pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to join the conversation in the Facebook group or leave a comment on our website and tell us what you got out of this podcast and what other questions you would like us to ask Josh if we ever do a follow-up episode, which we definitely plan to do. So if you want to ask Josh any questions in the follow-up episode, drop them in the comments on the page or in our Facebook group and enjoy. How long have you been freelancing?
So it's been a weird one because the first freelance job I had, I was super young. And it was basically when I was probably around 16 and I had saved up loads and loads of money to buy like one of those tiny Mac minis. And it was like the first time that I had kind of like access to like Photoshop and the Adobe suite and all that kind of stuff. And where I was from in the UK, like clothing labels were like blowing up and like everybody and their mum was starting a clothing label. So it was like the first time when, for me anyway, when social media was coming out and I had a whole new access to the internet and creating things like in the digital form. So I started reaching out to all these kind of like clothing labels and seeing if they wanted logos done and design ideas and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of just naturally unfolded from there, really. I mean, these were like really, really small jobs that I got free clothes for in return for exchange of like the services, I guess. And then as I kind of went through university, I started getting better clients, and then eventually, when I went to study my master's in branding and identity, I started getting even better clients because I was in London. So it was never, for me personally, it was never really something that I really had planned to do. It kind of just more organically evolved into what it is today. And it wasn't until I started getting a bit older and expenses started growing that I started to take it a little bit more seriously. So that's kind of like how I got into it, and that was how I kind of found myself. And it's kind of grown now to a point where I've never actually had a real job. I've only ever freelanced and had contract positions and all that kind of stuff. So it's really nice. It's nice to be able to kind of manage your things and find clients that feel right fit for you, rather than going in, for me personally anyway, going to a job that's, I guess, more the same every single day, because I guess I can mix things up a little bit more while working on different projects, which is always fun.
Yeah, you did the personality test and you got the creative unicorn, right?
I got the creative unicorn. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, one of those traits of like the creative unicorn is they always have to have like new projects and creative freedom, or they get bored really easily.
Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely think that sums up my personality in quite a good way. I mean, when I got that as well, I was just like, oh yeah, okay, I can definitely see that. But yeah, I like to mix things up and work with a different bunches of people and different projects, and I think that that's super exciting for me because it kind of just is super exploratory, and I get to just see what's about.
Yeah, you learn a lot from each different client that you work with. So I can see how that's really useful. And you started really young, 16.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it was definitely like not what I had really intended to do. I mean, it was at that point where I was like in art college and just kind of like studying and wanted to start creating and then wanted to build up my portfolio for uni basically. It's kind of evolved into just how it is today and my only source of income and working style basically. So that's great.
Yeah. How did you reach out to your first few like clients and brands? Was it just email or on social media?
So yeah, it would have been super unprofessional when I was that young, to be honest. Just like DMing them and sending emails and all that kind of jazz. So I think the strategy for kind of getting leads now has changed a little bit to how it was back then. But yeah, just super kind of conversational, I guess.
Is that still kind of your strategy, but in a different way? Or do you have like a completely different strategy now?
I actually changed my strategy quite a lot in terms of how I get clients and create them and get jobs. So last year, I started actually teaching branding and identity, branding and marketing to entrepreneurs and small business owners. And so I basically would create loads of Facebook marketing, give away kind of like lead magnets in return for email addresses, and then I'd start delivering them little pieces of content and things that they could start implementing into their business. And because I was in Bali at the time, it was kind of like really kind of like a small community. So then I ran seminars essentially, like weekend long seminars for business owners and entrepreneurs, and taught them how to do it and install certain strategies into their businesses within 2 days and built out their brands with them. And from this, basically, after kind of doing these seminars, pretty much everybody wanted to work with me after kind of like teaching them all the things that they wanted to do. So that kind of now became a way to create more clients and more work for me, which was really interesting as well because it would build up a nice relationship between us, between the client and and me. Because I guess for a lot of period of time it was just in a different context. I guess it was kind of like how we met, and did it kind of like online in different countries, and I'd been doing that for so long, so it was nice to mix things up and do it kind of like more physical and then have online. So it was like a mix of all those connections basically. So yeah, so that was kind of, it was unexpected for me as well to start getting clients that way, but it's been a really good strategy in terms of building up a kind of like a longer lasting connection with them, because it got so personal, I guess, in these kind of like 2 days and then building out over a longer period of time, which felt really nice.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of that 2 day kind of strategy before. Do you do those seminars for free or do they have to pay to attend?
Yeah, so they had to pay to attend, but I had kind of like built up a strategy beforehand of giving them kind of like content and building up that relationship with them. So they knew when they would kind of like pay for a seminar that they would get a good amount of information and things done for their business, which was really awesome because we basically built up campaigns for them all within 2 days that then they went and put into place the very next week and started getting awesome engagement and results from that. So it was really fun as well for me personally, going into the kind of like teaching side of things, because I think a lot of the time from me previously, I've always always done it behind closed doors, if you know what I mean, with different clients. And it's fun getting them to be really involved in the process. I mean, I had a lot of interesting conversations with that, and I think that that sparked so many ideas. And I guess it's like this with what you're doing with a podcast. I think that conversations really bring out so many awesome ideas and possibilities basically. So it was just fun to exercise that muscle.
Yeah, I understand. I recently started doing like a lot more training and consulting in Facebook ads, which is what I do in my freelance work. And it's completely different when you start teaching and you learn a lot about it, and you also learn a lot about your clients and about yourself. It's like a whole nother level.
Yeah, totally. How are you finding it? Are you enjoying it compared to other things that you've done in the past?
I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot because I feel like it's not a lot of responsibility on me. You know, I can teach them how to do it, and then I'm just like, "You go do the work."
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm just here to support and encourage and, like, give answers, but I'm not doing, like, all of the actual work myself, and so that part of it, I really love, and I love seeing their progress, you know, when you see people take on this advice and they use it and they get great results and they come back to you and they're like, "Oh my god."
Yeah, for sure. I think that that's so rewarding as well because it's kind of like everybody feels empowered then, if you know what I mean, because people then have the skills to go and take it into play, which is at the end of the day, I think that a lot of freelancers want to be able to have the skills so they can do them themselves, do it themselves. You know, it's awesome that you're kind of like able to do that and give them the ability to go out and get their own results and kind of like nurture the journey, I guess, which is always super exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, 100%. So, how long did it take from like your very first client to where you finally felt like you made it as a freelancer? Like, I've done it now. I'm a legitimate freelancer. I don't have to work a 9 to 5 anymore. How long did that take?
From my first job where I was getting enough income to support myself, that was outside of like a, because I had, when I was like in uni, I had like a bar job as well, working on the bar, and I did freelancing on the side. So I'm gonna count from the first time that I had a job, I guess, so I could support myself without a side job. So that was probably, what year is it now? 2020, 2016. So probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I think, around that. So yeah, I would say around 4 years till I felt super comfortable in terms of being able to go all in on it and feel confident in terms of, I guess, stability and security, in terms of like not having to like really worry about when the next client was going to come or how I was going to find them. So I mean, there was tricky times in that journey where clients would go bust or not pay me and all of that crazy stuff that I'm sure so many of your listeners will have experienced, because I guess that's just part and journey and learning of being a freelancer. Yeah, I'd say probably around 4 years till I felt super comfortable and stable in and being a freelancer, I guess.
That makes sense. 4 years, though, that's quite a while. But I definitely understand it takes time. Nobody ever feels like they make it.
Yeah, totally. I guess it is a while, but I mean, it was also just me kind of, I guess, learning and being a young person and being like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna move to the other side of the world and just travel and see what happens there. And like I had a client base in like London, and then I would move to Bali, and then have to try and build one up on the other side of the world. And it was just, I guess, it was me being, I am to some extent naive in terms of how to stabilize and find a regular source of clients and work, basically. But I mean, over a period of time, that kind of like balanced and found like a baseline grid, I guess.
Yeah, after a while you get used to it. You get confident in yourself, and I see that things kind of just like level out. It becomes a career and not just like a job.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that for a lot of period of time, I was just seeing it as like very short-term jobs, because I wasn't 100% sure what the long-term game was. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, for the next 6 months, I'll do this and I can do this, and it was just seeing more. I was viewing it more on like a project by project basis rather than like a long-term game plan. Because, as I say, it just kind of, for me personally and my personality anyway, this whole kind of like journey of freelancing just naturally kind of like unfolded. It was never super planned, to be honest. So I guess that's why it took a little bit longer than maybe other people.
Yeah. No, I think that's a reasonable amount of time. Did you know any other people who were freelancing when you were doing it?
So I had a couple of friends who would do it, but it was never like like a full-time thing for them. Like I still now I think I only have one friend who freelances and does it full time. So just in my little circle, kind of like here, there's not that many people that I know personally that are doing it full time.
Yeah, it's still kind of a new thing. This same for me. Like I barely know now that I have guava bean. Like I start to know more people, but it's still like one person here, one person there.
Yeah, totally. Well, I guess that you must know quite a few now with your community. That seems to be kind of like really picking up.
Yeah, well, the nice thing for me is that my friends are getting into it. Like the people close to me starting to get into freelancing, starting to experience it. And that's very rewarding because,
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah, one of the reasons I created Grapevine was for my friends, for the people who always asked me, like, how did you do it? How do I become a freelancer? And I was like, I'm just going to make this so that you have all your answers and I don't have to keep answering this question.
Oh, that's so awesome that you did that for them though. And how have they like found the process in terms of, I guess, having the support from you and then kind of going upon their journey?
I think they appreciate it. I think they find it helpful. The funny thing is that for them, they've never not had that support. Like they've never not had a community of people that they could go to or a friend that they know who's a freelancer that they could ask for help. For me, like when I was starting, I didn't have any of that, and I feel like that's what made it difficult.
Oh, 100%. I was literally just thinking that that was what I was going to say next, that I wish that Guava Bean had been around when I was kind of like starting out and figuring it all out and stuff. Because I guess I didn't kind of come across you guys for until a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, we've only been around 2 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So it was exactly when you were starting out, wasn't it? That we kind of like connected.
Yeah, I think you were one of our very first freelancer stories.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Oh well, it's always it's great to see kind of like how many people that you've helped and the awesome community that you've created in such a short period of time.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure. It's amazing for me to see it also. I'm happy to do it. So, when you were just starting out, and if you didn't know any other freelancers, like how did you know how much to charge for your services?
Was a tricky one, especially when I was first starting out. I genuinely think I will watch quite a lot of like YouTube videos in terms of like how much to charge and did a lot of Googling and all this kind of stuff. But it I was going along for quite a long time just doing like by the hour, blah 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 blah. And then it wasn't until I once kind of like read this article or this blog post or something somewhere that basically said that you need to add profit onto the time that you work, which I was like, oh, okay, because I would just charge by the hour and then I'd have to maybe do like take up all my time and it was just getting charged for that actual hour. But I watched this video that was like after you kind of like deliver a certain amount of value, then after you've paid just for your time, then there needs to be like a little extra chunk that's kind of like add like goes back to the business after you've paid yourself. And I think that that for me was kind of a game changer in terms of understanding how to price my stuff that was actually not undervaluing myself and kind of like my services and what I did, but actually being able to grow something that was delivering enough value to my clients in a way that was felt more balanced. And I think that that question about pricing things is always like it's always there somewhere in the back of my head, being like, oh, am I undercharging for this? And I think it's always like a tricky one because I want to kind of like connect with people and work to their budget because often um, so many projects and clients that I get, I just kind of like fall in love with their story and want to help them as much as I can. So I think that yeah, it's just been it was definitely a kind of like painful journey at the start about understanding exactly how to price things. But I think that over a period of time, it got to a place that I felt comfortable in terms of creating, I guess, packages and understanding how much certain things would cost. Because for me, I guess I'm a designer and I do branding, so I would know how much time that a logo would take, and if I had to kind of like outsource different things, or what needed to get things animated or do this, then I could kind of like factor that in. So it was kind of like an unconfident process in terms of really feeling secure in talking about money. And I think that that was a big thing for me at the start as well. I always felt uncomfortable kind of like saying how much things cost or asking to be paid and all that kind of jazz. So it just, I think as I learned and as I grew, I kind of like found where the happy spot was for that. So yeah, that was kind of, I guess, how I kind of like figured it out. But how about you? What was your process in terms of
It
that?
was very similar to yours. A lot of trial and error, a lot of, like you said, painful, painful process. I also undervalued myself at the beginning, and it was just because I was new to freelancing. Like I didn't feel confident in what I was doing, and so I didn't charge confidently for it. So but like you know, over time, you gain experience, you see how much time it takes you to do something. You also start to consider the value that you provide on top of just the time and the work. Like it's not just an hour of my day, it's also the value on top of that. And so when I started to think about that in terms of, you know, the value that I provide and also comparing myself to the competition, seeing what other people were charging for similar services, I always wanted to charge, like you know, something comfortable for my clients. I didn't want to charge too expensive. I wanted to kind of be in a sweet spot, but I knew that in order for me to feel happy about my work, it would have to be, you know, it has to be a rate where I feel like I'm getting paid properly for my time. I just learned through experience that if I undercharge, I end up resenting the work. It ends up feeding into my work and not being as good quality. The client isn't as happy. It snowballs from there. So in the long run, I realized I do everybody a favor by charging what I feel like is right for the project.
100%. And I think that it's so important to factor value into the pricing. And I think for such a long period of time, I never did that. And yeah, I think that it's something that, especially when you start out, I guess it's that kind of like lack of confidence in terms of understanding how much value you actually provide and not necessarily owning that. And I think that over a period of time, you kind of step into your confidence and understand that actually you do bring value to clients, and that it's actually worth probably even more than you're charging. So yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a common thing. I see it with all freelancers, not all of them. Like experienced freelancers, they get it. Like they've been through the ringer, they know what they're worth, they charge appropriately. But with new freelancers, I see that they often, you know, struggle with the pricing. Just the conversation around money is awkward when you're not used to it.
And I think that it was also awkward for me in terms of like when if they didn't pay on time, and then understanding that process and how to handle that.
Yeah, that's super awkward. Have you ever had to like really chase a client for an invoice?
So the worst one I've ever had, yeah, I've had that a couple of times, but now I've kind of got a more structured process in place so that it doesn't happen. Um, but basically, I had a client that was like a startup, and I probably did a good 3 months of work for them, kind of like on this retainer, and they went bust and didn't pay.
Wow.
And so yeah, that was such a big blow, and that was kind of yeah, that was a number of years ago now. But after that, it kind of spurred me to never let that happen again, because that just really did not float well for me.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Did the relationship end well, or are you guys like
Oh, I mean, it was no, we don't speak anymore. It was a tricky one because it was like a company, or it was like a startup that was basically created by friends, and they had loads of funding and stuff. But it was, you have to talk to this guy to then talk to this guy to then talk to this guy. So it was just going around in circles. And after a few months of chasing them and getting other people to who I was working with to try and chase them as well, I was just kind of like, oh, this isn't worth my energy anymore. There's getting no response from them, so I just left it, and then kind of developed contracts with people that were more in depth and had kind of, I guess, boundaries in terms of late payments and getting that in place, to ensure that it never happened again, basically.
Yeah, that's smart, getting those contracts in place.
Oh, 100%, 100%. But I guess again, this is just learning as you go. And at this point, I was still super inexperienced and learning the ropes.
Yeah, rookie mistakes. Everybody makes it. So how did you discover that like branding was your thing? Did you kind of always lean towards branding, or did you try lots of other like design?
So I guess when I was like super young, when I was like a kid, I just knew that like art in general, so something creative, something I could do with my hands, I guess, was just my calling, and that's what I would 100% do. And I think that as I kind of like grew up and then started getting these early freelancer experiences with these clothing companies, then I started to have a little bit more sway towards design. And I think that as that grew, it kind of really got me interested in terms of the relationship between like humans and design and how we can design for better experiences. And I think that just naturally, as I progressed into that, I then dived into creating brands that were personality driven, that kind of like created deeper connections with people. And it just really got me interested in building up connection and understanding how you can kind of like create meaningful experiences for customers and brands and things. So again, it was never really, I don't think at any one point when I was younger, it was just like, oh, I'm gonna be a brand designer. But as I kind of like got experiences and understood different things and immersed myself into different worlds, I guess, of design, then it just kind of became the next step in terms of what I was going to do next. And now it's all I do, and I love it. So it was kind of just a nice process in terms of finding, I guess, my calling. And yeah, I've worked with some awesome brands now, and I think that it's kind of got to a point where I really enjoy teaching about it as well, because I think that for so long previously, you had to kind of go to uni and do all these like degrees and really understand, or have kind of like, you have to really dig to find out how to kind of like create a good brand. And I think for me, it's just exciting to kind of like make that information accessible for lots of people, because I think that it's information that kind of like is super important for anybody, or it's like you can take little bits from it and apply it to certain things, especially if people are freelancing, I guess. So yeah, I guess that's how I kind of like got into it. It just kind of like unfolded. So yeah, was that kind of like similar to you? Did you was your how like Guava Bean, what got created and what you do now, was that kind of like a natural progression, or was it more of like a vision, I guess, in terms of that's what I want and I'm going to go get it?
With Guava Bean, it was definitely a vision, like I had a vision for the company that I wanted to create, and I just made as close as possible. But with my freelance career, it is something that just kind of unfolded randomly. I never even knew that I wanted to like work as a freelancer or anything. Like you always kind of liked art and had a passion for it. For me, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was a kid. Like I just kind of tried everything and I was like, "Look, this looks interesting. That looks cool. This looks fun." And I just kind of tried everything, and when I would get bored, I would move on to the next thing. And it just kind of went from there until I finally found myself in marketing. And I was like, "Well, this is a challenge." I can see myself doing this for a while. And that just kind of became my thing. I feel like I found my niche with marketing. And it's not just the work, it's also the people. Like I get to work with these really great business owners. I talk to them very directly. I see into their business. They teach me so much. Like just working with business owners, I learned so much. So it's through that whole trial and error that I found my calling, so to speak. But I honestly feel like my calling will be entrepreneurship and business. I think freelancing gave me the start that I needed. It gave me the skills that I needed to start my own company.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that I just, from what you're saying as well, I see resonance within it, because for me personally, that's kind of, I guess, my journey so far of it kind of unfolding naturally. And now it's the point where I'm kind of like creating the vision, and I'm about to launch kind of like my own company, I guess, in the future. So yeah, there's definitely I see similarities in terms of your journey to mine, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like you've always been very passionate about like design and art and branding, and this is just kind of like you taking it to the next step. Like once you create your own business, it's kind of like you're just taking that passion to the next step and becoming more of a teacher and just kind of putting it on a bigger scale. Whereas before it's something that you always just keep for yourself, and it provides for you, but it doesn't really benefit other people outside of your clients and your little circle. So tell me a little bit more about your company and what you're creating.
Yeah, literally kind of like as what you've said, I think for freelancing for so long, it's kind of been in my own little circle and behind closed doors. And so now it's kind of, especially after doing all the teaching and stuff. So that's kind of the direction that I'm going to go down, around kind of like teaching small business owners and entrepreneurs how to brand and market themselves and create kind of like compelling brands and communication that connects them with more clients, kind of like helps them establish more authority within the industry, and essentially just tries to help them grow their business in ways that are more in alignment with kind of like emotional communication and creating meaningful content and and things that position their brands in a different way to their competitors. So as the teaching, that's kind of like one module to it, but I guess in terms of that's kind of like more paid. So I'm just kind of creating a bunch of content, and I'm going to start getting into content creation, in terms of I'm going to launch a YouTube channel, which will hopefully be up in the next couple of months, and kind of want to build up an audience that I can kind of like deliver them content for free that kind of like helps them pave the way to implement kind of like key strategies that will help them grow their business, in a way that maybe they wouldn't have known before. So that's kind of like the next step to what it's gonna come. And I think that there's again similarities in terms of what you do in terms of creating a community and kind of like delivering value to them so they can kind of like get the skills and knowledge that you kind of like have experience with, doing it from your freelance stuff, so that they can then have the skills and do it for themselves and use that to take it wherever they want to go with it. So yeah, it's been great. It's been a long journey. I've got different online courses that I'll hopefully launch as well. I've even been working on a book that, hopefully towards the end of this year, I'll self-publish. But it's been a kind of like a transition between freelancing and then I guess compiling all of the information and the experience that I have, and then kind of like pushing it back out to a wider audience so that they can kind of like use it and implement it into their own strategies, I guess.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's the goal. Like once you master something, the next step is to teach it.
100%.
Yeah, so you're going in that, you're following that journey.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think as well, like if you've got information that actually can really benefit other people, then I think like keeping it to yourself is kind of like doing a disservice to the world. I think that we're in such a good place at the moment in terms of communication on online and podcasts and online courses and communities, that people want to know all of the kind of like the information and different skills and develop new ways of doing things. And I think that I want to be able to, I guess, serve people to help them do and grow in whatever ways that I can help them do that. Because I think that when I was starting out, I would have appreciated that. And I'm not saying that that didn't exist, but it wasn't until later on in life that I kind of like found things that would help me. So yeah, I just want to, I guess, give back in ways that I would have appreciated when I needed it.
Absolutely. Honestly, that sounds exactly like why I created Coffee Bean. Exactly same reason. I think sharing is caring, and sharing that knowledge is the best thing that you can do to help everybody.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. How have you found it so far, or what is the kind of like the number one takeaway that you've got from it?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've honestly found it a lot more difficult than I expected. I thought that I could create the content, and you might not have this challenge because you put a lot into your branding and the strategy. But for me, I thought like if I just create the great content and put it out there, people will find it, they'll use it, they'll appreciate it. I won't have to keep answering the same questions over and over. Like it'll be out there in the world. And then I guess what I realized is that no matter how much you create, no matter how much you give and you put out there, there's always going to be people who have questions or who don't know where to find the answers or aren't willing to use the information that you've given them. Maybe it's not the right format for them, maybe it's not this or that. And so for me, the biggest takeaway is really learning how to create the content in a way that is easiest for the person to learn it or to like receive it. Like, how do people really want to learn, and what's really the best content that I can give them that they can easily absorb, they can easily use, they can easily work with. Yeah. I don't know if that was just a mistake that I had at the beginning of just thinking like, put it out there and people will find it. But I've definitely realized there has to be a lot more thought that goes into it, a lot more planning, a lot more careful consideration.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's never really talked about to the such extent of how much kind of like planning and things need to really be put into play before you kind of like put things out there. I came across this thing the other day that I thought was super interesting, and it's that to like create something successful, you need like three components, and it's like a visionary, an architect, and a builder. And most of us are really good at like two of those things. And I think for me, I was always a very good visionary and I was always a very good architect. And I think that building was the skill that I kind of needed to develop the most. And I think that over a period of time, about going into the design and building brands, that kind of managed to kind of like develop that skill, I guess. But yeah, it's always the planning in terms of understanding the right strategy to put the right content in front of the right people at the right time. That's always a tricky one to understand and master, I guess.
Yeah, and also branding it and just communicating the message clearly, because that's something that I struggle with. I know what I create, and so it's easy for me to know the value in it. But it's harder for me to communicate that value to people or to tell them like why they should invest their time or their money into this thing that I've created. That has been difficult for me. I'm not used to selling. I think that's something that I've definitely been working on.
Totally. I think that it always feels a bit, it feels a bit, I don't know, for me personally, it always feels a bit like, oh, I just kind of still in the back of my mind somewhere, that whole element of like selling something just feels, I don't know, not 100% like I want to give it to free, but it's just, I guess, goes back to the amount of value that you kind of like deliver. And one of the first teaching courses that I ever did, I think I charged people like $400 for the weekend, and the very next week, one of the people put the campaign that we built out in 2 days into play and generated like multiple five figures in like couple of weeks. So it kind of felt to me, it was just like, oh, maybe I need to charge more then. Because if people are getting this amount of value out of it, and she even said to me like it was the most profitable kind of like business expense that she's ever done. So yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that element of selling, just need to feel confident in that, I guess.
Yeah, and thinking back to what we were saying earlier about like talking about money as a freelancer, pricing your services is always tricky. I think it's kind of similar. Like when you become a business owner, you in some ways you have to go back to being a beginner and you learn all of those awkward mistakes, and like you have to go through all of those uncomfortable lessons again. And I feel like I'm learning all over like how to talk about money and how to price appropriately. Yeah, it's just part of the journey, being a business owner, continuing to learn and try new things, it's going to be worth it for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess that is another transition, isn't it? It's from like, I guess the three transitions that I see is from like like having a normal job to then transitioning to being a freelancer and then transitioning to, I guess, owning a business in like a different context and delivering things in a slightly different way to how you would do as a freelancer.
Yeah, and you need different skills for each level. So it's like every time you go up a level, you kind of have to start at the beginning and build up those skills again.
Feel a little bit overwhelmed, but you know you're gonna get there.
Yeah, yeah. Once you've done it once, like once you've mastered the freelancing thing, then you can keep, you can keep mastering things. You've been through that process, and I see the light at the end of the tunnel. Hey, guava beans, want to listen to the rest of this episode? Come join us inside the Freelancer Sandbox. We're offering a Corona special plan where you can join now and get free access until the end of May. You'll get podcast episodes like this and other upcoming guest episodes in the full uncut version. There's another 30 minutes to this episode, so you'll get the full 60-minute episodes only inside the Freelancer Sandbox. Because we know the importance of community at this time, we're opening a private network to everybody. So if you've wanted to see inside the sandbox, if you want to listen to the rest of this episode, if you want to get our support and our trainings and all our best resources, click the button or the link or just email us at hello@guavabean.com and we'll send you the link to join the Corona special plan. You will not have to pay anything to join this plan. You will not even need to put in a credit card. And we're even removing the automatic subscription to monthly membership. So when the plan ends in May, you don't have to worry about being automatically subscribed to something you didn't ask for. So come join us now, listen to the rest of this episode, and you'll get access to all upcoming future episodes until the end of May 2020. Stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of each other. Bye for now.